Well, it's incredibly difficult to believe we've already made it to week 9 of our practice transformation journey together. And as you've engaged in this process, if you've taken a few steps down the road of exploring what the current practice is at your practice site and crafting a vision for the future, you've been probably experiencing some of these aches and pains of seeing what is done in practice and the gap that exists between practice and the best practice knowledge, so what we know scientifically and what we're doing. And so you're beginning to craft a more and more precise vision of how you want to transform practice with your clinical partner. So today we're going to spend our time talking about problem summaries. So as we've discussed this model for sustained transformation, one of the key parts of this model is creating vision for the better future state, identifying priorities and then concrete goals that we're going to move toward. And one of the foundations for identifying those priorities is in the evidence-based practice model by Melnick is asking a burning clinical question in PICO format. So this is what is called step 1. So once we have a spirit of inquiry in our institution or context where we're asking, can we do things better? Is there a better future state than what we're experiencing right now? That enables us to ask clinically oriented questions. And as we ask those questions in a very structured way, we're more effectively able to identify priorities and goals. So what I'd like to do is take a step back and look at how in our discussion last week we talked about evidence-based practice as a mechanism for generating vision. And we talked about how the culture of an institution or organization is crucial to allowing us to ask questions that matter, to question what we do in day-to-day life, and ask, is there a better way to do it? Is there a better future state that we could achieve? So asking a clinical question comes out of that spirit of inquiry and then moves us to being able to ask clinical questions. So why ask a clinical question? It's been said that a prudent question is 1/2 of wisdom. So the concept that if we define the question well, we can more effectively answer it. Or the old saying that well begun is half done. If we can define what the question or issue is, then we can much more effectively address it. So let's take an example. This comes from your problem statement template. This is an example of a problem statement. Adolescent patients at our clinic do not take their HIV medicines. So what I'd like you to do is take a moment and pause our video, pull out your model for sustained transformation, and try to take this problem statement through the 7 steps of the change process. Just hypothetically. Do that thought exercise. Try to use this as a way to address each of those 7 steps, and then come back and join us. So what were some of your experiences in taking that problem statement and using it as the basis for a systematic change process? You probably experienced some significant challenges, and I'd like to dissect those together briefly as we consider how to write effective summaries of the problems that we're addressing. So if we look back at our problem statement, adolescent patients at our clinic did not take their HIV medicines. If we're taking this as the basis for engaging in systematic improvement and transformation, there are a lot of questions that emerge. Where is the problem located in this statement? So adolescent patients, is the problem the adolescent patient, or is the problem at our clinic? And what does it mean that they don't take their HIV medicines? Does that mean that one nurse practitioner, clinical officer equivalent who sees only adolescent patients observes that one of her adolescent patient doesn't take their HIV medication consistently and they're lost to follow-up, and that particular nurse practitioner generalizes to all the adolescent patients in the facility? Does it mean that they don't take their medications when it's vacation time from school? Does it mean that they don't take their medications consistently? Is it a whole cohort of adolescents? What's the baseline that we're using to compare? Is it that nurse practitioner's experience, or is it a gold standard for how often we take medications? So you can see this problem statement is profoundly general. And so when we take that problem statement and try to use it as a mechanism for a systematic change process, we find that we come up short. So I'd like to present for consideration this alternative statement. This is framed using the Lawrence framework for problem statements that's demonstrated in the template posted on Blackboard. So let's try this one on. In calendar year 2013, adherence to WHO-approved antiretroviral drug therapy, or ART therapy, among adolescent patients at the Coptic Hope Center for Infectious Disease, which is a national HIV referral center in the country, is 50% lower than ART adherence in adults. So now we have a sense of when this is happening. It's in calendar year 2013. We have a sense of the issue is adherence to a specific WHO-approved medication regimens, so that this is a national and international benchmark. We're comparing adolescent patients' adherence to adult adherence, so that becomes the baseline comparison. And those adult patients are patients in the same clinical center. So now we've said that, moved from saying adolescent patients at our clinic don't take their HIV medicines to saying what specific medical center it is. And because we've defined the medical center and we have knowledge of how that medical center performs nationally, is an exemplar of HIV care in the country, we can now begin to think much more strategically about our issue. So if this is a center of HIV care excellence, and the adolescent adherence is 50% lower than in adults, now we need to start thinking strategically about that population of adolescents. What is it about that group that might contribute to lower ART medication use? This could still be refined further, perhaps to give measures of defining adherence and defining how we're measuring adherence in a future iteration. But you can see that this statement is a radical improvement from the one that we first started with. And so if we take the second statement that defines where the problem's happening, who's affected, when it's occurring, we can begin to create a team for innovation. Look at the medical center's successes, because now we have a defined location. We can look at best practices for ART adherence within the country. Within the adult patient population, within adolescent populations of similar East African countries. So we're able to much more effectively build capacity to address the problem because we've defined the problem well. And we can also set benchmarks and goals because we've defined the primary issue that we're addressing. It's adolescent ART adherence to globally defined regimens compared to the adult population at that facility. So here we go. We're much more capable of addressing that problem after we've defined it well. So there are two templates online. You have a template for designing a PICO question using the Melnick framework, and you also have a template for designing a problem statement using the Lawrence framework. So these are two different conceptual tools that are both designed to clearly, concretely, specifically identify the problem that's being addressed. So I want you to take this opportunity to become familiar with these two different strategies for defining problems. Both have different contexts where they're more or less helpful. And for the purposes of this course and your skill set, you're going to use both strategies for defining your problem. And there may be one that you resonate with more than another. There may be one that fits your clinical context more than the other. But for the purposes of developing skill in defining problems, we're going to use both. So let's look online at these templates. So we've pulled up our problem statement template. We went to start here, course templates and rubrics, and then the template for the problem statement. In this two-page document, you can see there's a rationale for why doing it, how this problem statement template has been borrowed and adapted from Robert Lawrence and Swan, and how the examples have come from students at Seattle University and at Emory. So essentially, what the problem statements do is they define who, what, where, and when of an issue. But they never identify causes or solutions. And you have to be as specific, concrete, and narrow as possible because, again, the more narrowly defined our problem, the more effectively we can address it and answer it. So on page 2, you can see there's some examples to prompt you to get to thinking about how you answer who, what, where, when of the problem. And there are also examples of stronger and weaker problem statements. So this one that we discussed today was an example of a weaker problem statement related to global HIV adherence. And then there's a stronger problem statement on the left using the Lawrence framework. And below you have the who, what, where, when clearly identified from within that sentence problem statement. So this is one way you'll define the issue or the problem you're addressing in your DNP project. So let's turn to the second framework. So here I've pulled up Melnick's template for framing clinical practice questions in a PICO format. So as you've seen in the text, the PICO format stands for patient, intervention, comparison, outcome, and timing. But specifically, how you define each of those 5 elements could vary depending on the type of question you're asking. So Melnick in the text, as well as in this template, gives you some ways to structure a PICO question based on the kind of problem you're addressing. So first, she talks about interventions when you're comparing 2 interventions to each other, or if you're looking at etiology or cause of a clinical problem, there's an example of that. When you're comparing 2 different diagnostic testing strategies to each other. And there's also a way to frame meaning or importance or significance questions. So that's the general structure of how to write a PICO question as one sentence, one question. And then below, she gives you examples of how to frame those different types of questions in the PICO format. So you'll go ahead and submit both a problem statement and a PICO question using the template guidance posted on Blackboard, and you'll submit them as a single document. On the first page, go ahead and copy your prospectus matrix so it's clear what your clinical practice context is, who you are, who the potential mentors are, and that will help to guide the understanding and the reading of the PICO question and the problem statement. So as we fast forward looking to our week ahead, we're going to look at how background information and clinical research evidence are strategies for making transformative impact. And the reason is because the existing scientific evidence and practice evidence become catalysts to help drive the intervention that you do, the DNP project, and ultimately the transformation that you make. So we'll look at how evidence-based practice evidence fits within the broader model for sustained transformation. So have fun writing your problem statements and enjoying the power that they will give you to much more effectively design your DNP project. We'll see you next week.